Okay, so we are going to continue and we are going to continue solving for y. And in the first video that's loaded up into this SI session, we did problems 1 and 2. And what we're going to do now are some problems that are a little bit more difficult when you're solving for y. And the reason that they're a little more difficult is because they have a y in both the numerator and in the denominator. So if you'll notice, this one has 3y minus 5 on top, 2y plus 8 on bottom. So that's going to make it solving, it's going to just have some more steps. So the good news is that you do start out exactly like you started for the first two problems. You want to get rid of the fraction, and the way that you do that is you multiply both sides of the fraction, or both sides of the equation, by the denominator. So we're going to multiply by 2y plus 8 on both sides. Now, when you do that, remember that this right here is going to distribute. So we're going to get 2xy plus, and then we have 8 times x, 8x. And so remember, you got to make sure your x goes with the 2y part and your x goes with the 8 part. And then also remember, over here, this 2y plus 8 is going to cancel out and just leave you with 3y minus 5. Now, once you get to this point, you'll notice this is the first time we've had a y on both sides of the equal sign. So what you want to do is get everything that has a y on one side. Now, most students want everything that has a y over here on the left-hand side, so that's what I'm going to do. But you really could put it either place. So since we want everything that has a y over here on the left-hand side, we're going to move this 3y. So those will cancel. And over here, all that does is leave you with negative 5. But over here on this left side, it kind of leaves you with a mess because you really can't combine that minus 3y with anything at all. So you just have 2xy plus 8x minus 3y. Now that's a bunch of stuff. But what you have done is you've put the two terms that have a y over there on that left-hand side. Now what you want to do is get every term that doesn't have a y over on the right-hand side. So you'll notice this first term, 2xy, well, that does have a y, so we're going to leave it. But this 8x, that doesn't have a y. So we are going to move that. And then I'm going to draw kind of a big arrow. I'm going to move over here to this part of the screen. And so when we do that, we have 2xy. The 8x's are gone. Minus 3y. And then over here, we have negative 8x minus 5. And I'm going to make that full screen so that I got a little bit more room. So now what you want to notice is this. You have everything that has a y over here on the left. And so I'm going to put y terms over here. Everything that has a y is going to go over here. And everything that doesn't have a y is over there. Here is the trick. So I'm going to put a little star right here. The trick is factor out a y. So once you have this, everything that has a y on one side, everything that doesn't have a y on the other side, now you have to factor out the y. So that's one reason we've talked about factoring in here already. So if you factor out the y out of 2xy, that leaves you with 2x. And we have a minus. And if you take the y out of 3y, that just leaves you with 3. And then over here, you're not going to do anything but bring this down because you don't have a y to factor out on this side because that side did not have a y in it at all. But this is what you have done. By factoring, you have really made this, and I'm even going to draw it in a different color because I want you to see it. This is now y times 2x minus 3. Now, y'all, that's real important. And the reason it's real important is because we can get rid of something that's being multiplied. And the way that we can get rid of something that's being multiplied is just by dividing it. So we're going to divide by 2x minus 3. So we get y equals, and then we have negative 8x minus 5 over 2x minus 3. And so I want you to realize when you start out with a fraction that has a y in both the top and the bottom, you are very likely to end up with a fraction as an answer as well. So you notice you had kind of an ugly looking fraction to start with. Well, you got kind of an ugly looking fraction to end with also. And that's pretty common. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally don't think that's probably the easiest problem that we've ever looked at in this class. So if you want to pause this for just a second, make sure you've got all your notes down. I'm going to go ahead and erase this one, and we are going to do another one that is almost identical, just with different numbers, hopefully to kind of set that in stone a little bit, just so that we can practice a little more. Just the same kind of thing. I've been teaching algebra for a really long time, guys, and this particular one or a problem like this in this section tends to be the one that kind of gets everybody every time. So doing 2 of them is probably not going to hurt us. So here we go. We'll call this one problem 4. Just for sake of room on the screen, I'm not going to write the instructions, but the instructions once again are to solve for y. And it's going to look really similar to problem number 3. So we're going to have x equals 2y plus 5 over y minus 4. So it's a fraction, same as problem 1, 2, and 3. Anytime that you have a fraction, and if it's helpful, I'll put it in a different color. This is the first time I've done this, but we'll put it in a different color. Multiply both sides by the denominator of that fraction. That's what you always want to do to clear that fraction out. So if you multiply x times y minus 4, you'll get xy minus 4x. And then over here, remember your goal is to always multiply by the denominator so that that always cancels out. That's really nice. And then we get 2y plus 5. So now you have to remember, so that's your first goal. Goal number 1, accomplished, no more fraction. We like that. Goal number 2, everything that has a y on one side, everything that doesn't have a y on the other side. So I'm going to start out by moving this 2y right here. Since it's positive, we're going to subtract it. Notice you cannot combine it with any of these other things over here. So unfortunately, you're just left with xy minus 4x minus 2y, and then over here it just equals 5. So now if you look real closely, what you have is everything that has a y is over there on the left, but you don't have everything that doesn't have a y over there on the right. So this only term that doesn't have a y with it is that minus 4x. So now we're going to add it. So that's going to be xy minus 2y, and then it's going to equal 4x plus 5. And here's the thing, a lot of people get to this point and they go, great, okay, I got everything that has a y over there, I got everything that doesn't have a y over there, wonderful, and then they forget. And it's easy to forget because it's not something that we do very often. And so I told you it was the trick on the last one, and I'm going to go ahead and write it out right here as well. The next thing that you do, once you've got all your y's over here, everything without a y over here, you factor out a y. And that's the step students tend to forget. So if we take the y out of xy, we're left with x. If we take the y out of negative 2y, we're left with minus 2. And then once again, over here with this 4x plus 5, there isn't any y to take out. So you just bring it down. Don't do anything with that. And then remember one more time, the reason that you do that is because by factoring it out, I'm trying to make this kind of really big so that it stands out and reminds us, you have made this y times x minus 2. And the way to get rid of something that's being multiplied is to divide it. And so what we get for an answer is y equals 4x plus 5 over x minus 2. So remember, just like you had an ugly fraction to start with, it's really common that you're going to have an ugly fraction to end with as well when you get your answer on one of these. Now, I don't want you to think that every single problem is a fraction, because that's actually not true. It's just that I started with those because that tends to be what students struggle with the most. But not every one of these solving for y is going to be a fraction. So we're going to spend some time looking at some exponents and making sure that we remember how to solve for y when we have exponents and fractional exponents as well running around in an equation. Okay, so on this one, remember instructions are still solve for y. We're going to start out with one that looks pretty common. Seeing something like this is probably not going to throw you for a loop or anything. You're used to seeing something raised to the third power. But remember, you need y by itself, and what you have right now is x. So the first thing that you should probably notice is, okay, we've got two things with the y. We've got this raised to the third power, and we've got this plus 1. So what we want to do is get rid of the plus 1 first. And the way that we're going to do that is to subtract 1 right there. And that's going to give me x minus 1 equals plain old y cubed. Now, I want you to remember, and I'm going to erase this in just a second, y cubed really means y times y times y. It really means there's 3 of them. And so what you have to remember is the way to get rid of something raised to the third power is to take the third root of it, or sometimes people will call that the cubed root of it. Now, the way that we know that this is a cube root is there's this little 3 right there. If there wasn't a 3 there and we just put the house, that would mean a square root. But remember, the name of the game in algebra is whatever you do to one side's okay, but you better do it to the other. So if you take a cube root of this side over here, well, then you also have to take a cube root of this side over here. Now, the good news is this root and this power cancel. And so that leaves me with y. Cube root cancels with the third power, but then nothing is over here to cancel. And so we just have the cube root of x minus 1. Now, I want you to be real careful and realize that we took the cube root of the whole side. So my answer is very different than this right here. This is just the cube root of x, and then that minus 1's on the outside. We had to take the cube root of everything, and so our answer should have, so I'm going to put a big X right here. Our answer should have both x minus 1 inside of that third root. All right, so let's try something pretty similar to this one. It's going to have roots and powers in it again. I don't know if y'all can hear, but I closed my door so that y'all wouldn't hear anybody running through my house, and my cat is right outside and meowing like crazy just because it's a closed door. I don't know if any of y'all have cats, but man, mine cannot stand any time a door is closed in the house. It's kind of funny. All right, so on this one, I'm going to write this out, and then we're going to make sure that everybody really realizes exactly what's going on before we start talking about how to solve for y. This one's kind of a doozy. It's got a lot of stuff in it. So x equals, and then we have 4 times. And if you'll see this little 5 right here, it's right on the outside of that root. So that means the 5th root of y plus 2, that whole y plus 2 is underneath the root sign, but then this plus 3 is over here at the end. So what you want to do anytime you've got something like this, you got a lot of stuff, you're kind of like, it's kind of like an onion. You're going to sit here and you're going to peel back the layers. So the first thing that you want to do is get rid of everything that's outside that root sign. So we want to get rid of that 3 and we want to get rid of that 4. Well, the way to get rid of the 3 is to subtract it. So if I do that, that leaves me with x minus 3 equals 4 times the 5th root of y plus 2. Okay, now we've got to get rid of the 4. So since 4 is being multiplied, we're going to divide by it. So that's going to be x minus 3 over 4. And those 4's are going to cancel. And we've got the 5th root of y plus 2. Okay, so what we've done is gotten rid of everything that's outside of that root sign. So what we have to do now is get rid of the root sign. And so what you need to remember is that a root and a power cancel each other out. So this is the 5th root. So the way to cancel the 5th root is to raise it to the 5th power. But remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So what that's going to leave me with is x minus 3 over 4, all of that in parentheses raised to the 5th power. Now this root and that power are going to cancel out, and that just leaves me with y plus 2. Now the good news is you're almost done. The only thing that's with the y is a plus 2, so you remember that we just subtract it. But you have to remember you cannot subtract it with that fraction because that fraction is being raised to a power. So it may look like kind of an unfinished answer, but this really is as good as we can get. X minus 3 raised to the 5th, or I'm sorry, x minus 3 over 4 raised to the 5th power, and then minus 2 over there on that outside. All right, so let's try one more for this evening. And it's going to be a little different than anything that we have seen so far. It's still going to deal with some powers, but the powers and the roots that I've showed you so far have been whole numbers. So we've dealt with like the 3rd root and the power of 3 and the 5th root and the power of 5. But this one's going to be a little bit funny. So we've got x equals parenthesis y plus 3 to the 2/3 power, that's a little different, and then minus 4. So once again, you want to get this thing to the power by itself. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of the minus 4, and we're going to do that by adding 4. So this is x plus 4 equals, and then this ugly kind of mess, y plus 3 to the 2/3. Now here's the problem. If that was y plus 3 squared, well, we could just take the square root. Or if it was y plus 3 to the 3rd, well, we could just take the cube root. But we can't do either of those because it's a fractional exponent. So neither of those are really going to get this for me. So what you need to remember is anytime that you have a fractional exponent, raise it to the reciprocal. Now that's a big math word, and all that means is flip it. So if I have 2 over 3, we're going to raise it to the 3 over 2 power. And remember, whatever you do to one side, you got to do to the other. Now here's why you're going to do that. These fractions multiply. So technically that's 6 over 6, which really is 1. And so what we really have here by doing that to the 3/2 power is just plain old y plus 3 to the 1st power. And that's what we want, because then we can just get rid of the exponent. Another way to think about that, if you don't like that, is the 3's would cancel and the 2's would cancel, and we just have y plus 3. So you can think about it kind of either way that you want. But then over here, this doesn't have an exponent with which to cancel. And so it's just x plus 4 to the 3/2. Now you have to remember you're almost done, but if you look at that, you still don't have y by itself. You have that pesky 3. So it's plus 3, so we're going to subtract 3. But be really careful. You cannot say that this is x plus 1, because you can't say, hey, plus 4 minus 3, because that x plus 4 is inside of something with an exponent. And so you just have to leave that x plus 4 to the 3/2, and then minus 3 equals y. Now, really quickly, I mentioned in the beginning of the very first video, solving for y is the difficult part of section 4.6. So when you log into our course in Canvas and you go to your week modules, there are lots of videos there over solving for y. You really need to work through all those videos. They're going to be just like these examples that I just did for you. You need to work through those because then when you get to section 4.6, you will have at least that portion down. And so it won't be like you're trying to remember how to solve for y and how to find an inverse function at the same time. So make sure that you don't kind of skim over that. Make sure you do work through those. And then section 4.6 will be a little easier. And Miss Young will talk about section 4.6 on Thursday evening. All right. Y'all have a good night.